Live now is Shadow Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones. Stephen, thank you for your time. What do you make of the government's stimulus package announcement? They released quite a few details overnight, and $18 billion, a lot more than I think a lot of us were expecting.
Well, finally good to see some detail. We've been very concerned that the government was basically going to be a little bit too little, a little bit too small, a little bit too late on this. So pleased to see some initial detail out. Look forward to listening to the Prime Minister's announcement in a few hours' time. Look, cash to households, cash to small businesses, welcome that. Some tax relief for small businesses, welcome that. Assistance for apprentices, to keep apprentices in their jobs and on the job, welcome that. Obviously, very keen to see if there is going to be a response for the government on casual workers. 1 in 4 workers are employed on a casual contract. If they don't turn up to work, they don't get paid. So we don't want to see any perverse incentives where some of the lowest paid Australians have to go to work despite the obvious health risks to everyone else. So I hope that's addressed in the Prime Minister's statement. But I guess the overwhelming point I want to make is that if the government's got a program that they need to get through the Parliament, Labor will be working cooperatively with the government to ensure that that happens. We'll be providing additional advice and additional suggestions where we think the package is falling short, and I've already identified one area.
And that area is casual workers?
Yeah, look, that's an obvious area that needs to be addressed. The most vulnerable workers, obviously living hand to mouth, will need a little bit more compassion than the Attorney-General was showing earlier this week when he said, well, they'll just have to dip into their non-existent savings if they can't come to work. Clearly that is not an appropriate response. So we want to see both some compassion and a practical assistance for those workers, and perhaps that can be delivered through the detail of the small business package. The other thing I'd say, Annalise, is we don't know yet whether this is going to be enough. We hope it is. We don't know whether it is going to be enough, and perhaps a second round of support will be needed if this boost to the economy is not enough.
So just 2 points there. So if there isn't anything specifically to benefit casual workers, are you saying that this won't have the support of Labor, this legislation, when it comes to the House?
No, definitely not saying that. Obviously, if we're going to get a stimulus into the economy and it needs legislation, that needs to happen quickly. We've been calling on the government for over 6 months now to implement a stimulus package. We won't be doing what the government did to our stimulus package, and that is voting against it and holding it up in the Parliament. We offer the government full support. We'll obviously want to look at the detail, and if there is additional things that the government needs to be doing, then in a cooperative spirit we'll be pointing those things out. I've talked about casual employment and the need for us to address that issue. In the stuff that's been put out to the media overnight, there's also nothing there in the infrastructure space, and I think that needs some attention too, perhaps in a second wave of response. And I guess the third thing, Annalise, is it's one thing to make an announcement, it's another thing to ensure that it's followed through and implemented. And we've seen time and time again with this government that they're big on the announcement and the sales pitch moving through, but not as good on the delivery on the ground, and the bushfire response is a perfect example of that. Let's not make the same mistake twice.
So just a couple of points there. So when you say that you want to see some commitment that they'd raise the amount of stimulus in the long term, is this not what they're doing by having it be quite scalable with these cash payments, with the instant asset write-off? They can easily upgrade that without legislation, without any need for people to be introduced to a new program. That's something they can do with the click of the fingers.
Yeah, don't get me wrong here. We're not criticising the government about what they've announced. We might have some differences with the government about what's not there and about their capacity or their competence in delivery, but my criticism won't be about what they have announced, but what additional might need to be done in the short and medium term.
And then on that point of infrastructure, the government has said that they're keen to do any shovel-ready projects. They've brought forward $4.5 billion in the last year mid-year update. And is that not the kind of thing we should be looking at further down the track? Because we need stimulus right now. Is this not the time to be putting cash in people's pockets?
Oh, I think, to use the old cliche, we need to do a bit of walk and chew gum. We need to get the initial stimulus out the door, but we also need to have a plan ready to go if, in the very likely event that this is not enough, that it's not just a one shot in the locker. Remember, when Labor was dealing with the global financial crisis over a 6-month period, we rolled out 4 different packages of different scales, something immediately for the household sector to boost aggregate demand. We've got to see about what the government's doing with the details of that. They may need to do more. And then additional initiatives to invest in productive infrastructure and get businesses investing in productive infrastructure. It remains to be seen about whether enough has been done there. I'm particularly keen on seeing the government do some small and medium scale local stuff through the local government sector, because I know they have a capacity to work in every single community and to get building projects up and running very, very quickly. When you're dealing with your big infrastructure projects, whether they're roads or railways, very difficult to scale that stuff up quickly, and scaling up quickly is exactly what we need at the moment.
Speaking of quickly, it was about 2 weeks on this show that we were discussing this could be a bigger hit to or as big a hit to the budget as the global financial crisis. You tried to drop me in it last week, saying that that was my question and you didn't agree. I think, have we both
I would
been a bit
never drop you in it. I would never do that to you, Annalise.
Absolutely. But
I think we were arguing over what the difference between a stimulus package and a response was. I think we agree there needed to be a response. We've got one. The only question is whether it's going to be enough.
It is pretty extraordinary, though, that this has escalated so quickly in the last 2 weeks. Do you have any concerns about the speed of the government response?
Look, we've been saying for some time that the government needed to be putting an economic stimulus package in the field. Before Christmas, the economy was clearly slowing. We then had bushfires, we then had some floods in certain parts of the country, and we've now got coronavirus. So we've got a cascading series of problems which are visited upon an economy that was already in strife. I'm not going to say I told you so. I am going to say, come on, get your skates on. We've got to get this money out the door, and we've got to have more planned in the very likely event that what has been announced to date is not enough. I mean, I frankly don't think the government can do anything about the March quarter. We're nearly at the end of that. Everything they've announced so far is about trying to stave off a second drop in the June quarter. But I think we've got to be looking into the medium and long term as well. And that's why I say to the government, please don't be choking on your own rhetoric. Don't be afraid of going back on the criticisms you made of what Labor did in the past. Let's forget about that. Let's look to the future, because Australians aren't interested in a government in the midst of a crisis looking backwards, scoring political points. They're interested in them saving jobs, keeping businesses open, and looking to them doing what's in the national interest. And if that means doing more, as the British government has done overnight, then absolutely they should do more.
And just finally, Bill Shorten, a short time ago on Sky News, said that there should be greater quarantine measures, that we should be taking more drastic steps to stop public events than we are now. That's out of step with what we're hearing from Chief Medical Officer, from the Prime Minister, from Anthony Albanese. Is he inciting a bit of panic there with those comments?
Oh, look, I don't think so. I haven't heard Bill's comments, but what I do know is this. Each day this issue seems to be escalating, and we're seeing governments around the world step up their response. Overnight we've seen the Italian government go to a new and extraordinary level about closing down certain businesses or shutting certain businesses down. We've seen the Danish government overnight closing schools and childcare centres. Each government has got to assess the risks within their own countries and work out whether the measures are appropriate. As always, I think it's best that we are led by the medical advice and the health professionals in this area, but I don't think any of us are going to be surprised if, as if Bill is foreshadowing this morning, there is very, very soon a greater level of response and public health initiatives from both federal and state governments.
Stephen Jones, Shadow Assistant Treasurer, thank you for your time.
Great to be with you.